We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good evening, welcome to nufc Matters with me, Steve Wraith. They are, take my rightful place in the middle of the two legends, Supermac and Gibbo. Good evening, lads.
Hi, boys. Hi, Malcolm.
All right, that was the quickest overlap I've seen this season.
I've got it in the locker, Malcolm. I've got it in the locker. Yes, we start with breaking news in the last hour and a half that Callum Wilson is injured and he is out for 9 to 12 weeks as he requires surgery on his pectoral injury, John. What an absolute nightmare this is, mate.
Is that a breaking news, mate? I thought he was injured all the time. I mean, a chocolate teapot's got more resistance to heat, bless him, than it's tough because he's a good player, and I feel sorry. It reminds me, you know, guys, of Kieran Dyer. In the Kieran Dyer's days, he was always injured, England player, always injured. And I wrote at one time that, you know, because everybody was furious, I felt sorry for Kieran because it was his career. And he sent a lovely message saying, you're the only person that's ever said that. But having said that, I can't help but being fed up, you know, because this is so predictable. It so happens. I mean, this time, for goodness sake, it's his arm. You know, we've had all the other injuries, et cetera, but honest to God, is there anyone on Tyne's side that's surprised? And that's the awful tragedy of the thing. We're not surprised, are we? And doesn't it bring home to roost the folly that if this season of only going with 2 centre forwards, both of whom are injury prone, not buying a centre forward is coming home to roost now?
Malcolm, I know you're a bit, you're very honest when you talk about centre forwards. You were very honest about Chris Wood. You've heard the news today. What's your views on this one? Callum Wilson out for 9 to 12 weeks.
In all honesty, I think he's been carrying it for some weeks, for a number of matches. He hasn't been himself at all. He hasn't looked sharp in the way that we know he can be, and it's obviously not been healing, albeit perhaps that it's not had a chance to heal because he's had to play with Isak being injured. But the fact is that he now needs this surgery. He's going to be out pretty much until the end of the season, isn't he?
Yeah.
And Isak's still out, and Newcastle find themselves in this ridiculous situation of only having 2 forwards in the club, you know, and are really paying for it this season. But at the same time, I have to say that I in all my years in football, I have never, ever known a club to have such a woeful injury list as Newcastle have had this season. It's obviously completely affected all form right the way throughout, and that's why we've had a season that has been so up and down and I think it is because because when you've got so many players out injured, it's in players' minds. I mustn't get injured. I mustn't get injured. And that's the worst thing in the world for a player to take on the field, because that's when you do get injured. When you're saying, I mustn't get injured, I mustn't get injured. And I think that it's had a drastic effect on Newcastle's season generally, and all for the worst, not the better.
I mean, the thing the thing that staggers me about our injury list, and it has been longer than the A1, and it has been all season. And the thing that staggers me is there's so many freakish injuries. You think of the way Pope went down on his shoulder. I mean, he almost was lying on a feather bed, wasn't it? And it was suddenly out, and there we had Murphy out with a shoulder for how long? We've had Elliot Anderson with a cracked back. How on earth did that happen? We had Harvey Barnes for about 5 months with a toe injury. And this latest Wilson one isn't the usual hamstring or whatever. It's a freakish injury to his arm from when he fell, and it's something to do with the muscles in his arm. Well, I mean, how freakish are these injuries? And they're absolutely incredible. And all of them, by the way, and I know we're repeating ourselves, but all of them are long term. Look at this one. It's not an injury where you miss 2 games. Everybody goes out for a length of time. And I mean, it is absolutely crazy. But
yeah, it's not 2 games, it's 2 months and more.
But we've got to be truthful. It doesn't matter how good a player you are. If you don't play regularly, you're not of much use to anybody. And that is the situation with Callum Wilson. Bless him. He's a good player. He's been an England class centre forward, but he's not available regularly enough. And that's the bottom line. And it's always that way. And it isn't going to improve at his age with his injury record. It isn't going to get any better. So he is the one that's got to go in the summer. We've got to get some wiggle room by having to sacrifice a first teamer to give us wiggle room with the FFP. And Maxi was the one that we sacrificed last season. And if we have to sacrifice somebody, then I don't want it to be Bruno, who's a top-class player. I don't want it to be Joe Linton, because there's not many midfield players that can do what he does. So it's got to be Almiron and Wilson if somebody's got to be sacrificed to make way for people coming in. Callum, I'm afraid, and I've got utmost respect for his ability, but it's as I've said, if you're not available, it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you're not playing, you have no help. And Callum doesn't play regularly.
No, Gary says, if I'm being honest, you couldn't make up the injury crisis we've had for a number of months. I'm not superstitious, but is St. James's Park built on a Celtic burial ground? And Tim says, in all seriousness, the club dropped the ball by not getting a striker in the 2 transfer windows. Top 7 will be a challenge now with Elliot, with Wilson out. And David Cook says, I think Elliot's stress fracture in his back may have come from the extent of his bulking up in the summer, probably doing too much weight, which is an interesting idea. Yeah, the other news, of course, is around Dan Ashworth this week, John. And of course, the talk of him potentially going to Manchester United has resurfaced. El Giorgio said, would any financial profit compensation made from the release of Dan Ashworth count towards FFP? Please don't hammer me if it's a stupid question. Well, I would imagine it is. £10 million coming into the club would probably benefit FFP. There's no doubt about that. But this isn't cut and dry, John. This story, I would call it regurgitated, only because before Sir Jim Ratcliffe went to Manchester United, there was talk of one of his friends being a very good associate of Dan Ashworth. Dan Ashworth didn't really come out and deny that that he was that he could be interested, he could go. He's not really said a great deal since he came to the club. Now that Jim Ratcliffe's got his feet under the table and he's at Manchester United, the story's resurfaced. So, is there any news in it? Do you think, John? Is there a movement on Ashworth's behalf to go? Do you think, or do you think you do? Yeah,
I think it is there. I think an unofficial approach to see if he's interested has already been made to the man himself. He has indicated that he is interested. And I would be very, very surprised indeed if he doesn't end up there eventually. These things take an absolute eternity. You've got to work out compensation. You go on gardening leave. I mean, I think directors of football must have the most beautiful lawns and flower beds in the history of gardening, because they go on garden leave for an eternity. I mean, he was on garden leave before he come here, and he's going on garden leave again. His garden will be shown on Kew Gardens or something in the summer, won't it? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. But I think that he will go. And let me put this another way. Supposing... And there is something in this story, and the approach has been made to Dan Ashworth. It's got to be made through the front door to Newcastle United yet. But like all clubs, to sound out the situation, they're not going to walk through the front door of Dan Ashworth saying, going to say to them, I'm not interested whatsoever. You find out if you're interested. That's what I did on Newcastle United's behalf when they got Arthur Cox as manager. I was asked if I would speak to Arthur Cox unofficially to see if he was interested before they took it any further. I did that. Arthur said he was interested. I told Joe Harvey. Newcastle went through the front door and got him. That's the way it works. And it's working this way with Dan Ashworth. But you know what, Steve? If there was nothing in this from Dan Ashworth's point of view, he's just got to come out and get a load of stripes by saying, I am incredibly happy at Newcastle. This was a dream move. I am going to stay at Newcastle. I want to nip this in the bud now, and it's all not going to happen. Have we heard anything like that? No. And the reason we haven't is because he is interested. And you know the cycling guy, Steve, that's moved in with Jim Ratcliffe at Manchester United, the guy that run the GB cycling?
Yes.
He is a big friend of Dan Ashworth.
That's the connection, correct, yeah.
That's the connection. That's the connection.
Yeah, Malcolm's having issues with his internet tonight. You might have noticed his picture wasn't great, and he was in and out earlier on. So he was obviously trying to get that sorted out. So we'll just crack on. The news about Dan Ashworth, I think, John, is going to. It seemed to unsettle us. Do you think there's any truth in the rumor about him not getting on as well with Eddie Howe? There's been lots of rumors circulating around Tyneside that perhaps the relationship isn't as good as people may have thought. That could be a reason why he might move to Manchester United. Yeah. Or do you think it's down to the fact that maybe he thought he had money to spend when he's come here, he hasn't, so that it wasn't what it said on the tin?
I think there's a bit of both in it. I don't think there's, let's say, knock straight away on the head any presumption that Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth don't get on in hard loggerheads, because that is certainly not the case. But equally, he's not one of Eddie Howe's inner sanctum. Eddie Howe's got people around him. He's got his nephew working at Newcastle, who's working on the transfer front in the same way as Stan Nixon is. And there's a closeness and there's an absolute respect between Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth, respect for each other, but there's not a closeness. He's not part of the inner sanctum. It's not written in stone that they go together like fish and chips. It isn't like that. I think from Dan's point of view, what was on the tin has not quite been what's been served up to him. This is a longer project than he anticipated. It is hamstrung by FFP. Manchester United are much further down that road with the amount of revenue they generate, etc., etc. They have not got the restrictions Newcastle United have got. So that comes into the package as well. But I just want to say, because we're talking, doom and gloom here, but I just want to say that from my point of view, there's nobody bigger than the club. The club is the most important thing of the lot. Dan Ashworth has been very important in Newcastle. He was seen as a catch by Newcastle United when he was in Brighton, and seemingly Manchester United see him as a catch now. However, people think that he is the crux to the transfer windows for Newcastle, but he is not the talent spotter. He doesn't decide who, and a lot of people think he does or has a huge input, but he doesn't decide who the target is. He doesn't decide who the centre forward will be, who the number 6 will be. He didn't decide on Isaac or Botman or whatever.
Or Bruno, which some of the national media are claiming that he was to do with a Bruno transfer. He had absolutely nothing to do with it.
That's what I want to come to in a second. But his genius is that once Newcastle United decide who they want, he moves in and does the financial aspect of that deal. And he is clever at completing deals, etc., etc. But he doesn't pick the player. And let us remember that he come here 6 months after Eddie Howe because of the famed gardening leave. You've got to get your greenhouse into position before you can leave and take up a job. So he didn't come straight to Newcastle. In that period, we had our first transfer window, January 22, and we signed the 2 biggest, most influential signings this regime have had during that window in Bruno and Kieran Trippier. They were signed when we didn't have a director of football, and Ashworth had no participation in that. Now, if we are left going into the summer transfer window, which is a worry because it's an absolute crucial transfer window, because we've had 2 poor ones, we need a good one. If we go in without a director of football, Ashworth goes, we haven't got one appointed, or the guy's is already with another club and has got to do his severance pay and gardening leave, so we haven't got one this summer. It is not the end of the world. Our first window up here, we signed Bruno and we signed Kieran Trippier without a director of football, not through Dan Ashworth. So it is not the end of the world. It is a blow. But blows happen. We may have to take a blow with a top player leaving to get other players in. 1 step back to go 2 forward. Well, maybe this is the same. I'm not playing down what Dan Ashworth means to Newcastle, but let's not get carried away. Let's not say this summer's going to be ruined because Dan Ashworth's not going to be here. Because he wasn't here when we signed Bruno, and he wasn't here when he signed Trippier. And has there been 2 better signings than those 2?
No, definitely not. I mean, for me, I'm not bothered if he goes or not. If he goes, great, good luck to him. If he decides to stay, great, good luck. I trust the people in charge. I think they'll get a replacement who will be better. What about you, Malcolm? What's your news on this whole Dan Ashworth to Manchester United story, which is doing the rounds again?
Yeah, from what I'm reading now, because the story that existed some weeks or months ago, so it's sort of regurgitating. But I think now that the situation has changed somewhat at Manchester United, with Ratcliffe going in as a 25% shareholder, and he's making a lot of the decisions there, and I think that he's. His team, they've sort of looked around and spoken with a lot of people, and Dan Ashworth's name has kept cropping up. And Manchester United, they do a lot of wheeling and dealing in the transfer market, and so I can understand the move that they're making. The one thing that really does concern me is that now is a dreadful time for Newcastle to be looking at losing Ashworth, for the simple reason that that he, the manager, and other members of the staff, that they will be working at putting together a list for what they need to do in the summer. And the summer isn't that far away. The closed season, not that far away. We're in the middle of February, when we've got March, April, and a couple of weeks of May, and then the transfer window opens. And so there's not that long to go. And so what's Dan Ashworth going to be doing between now and then? He's not going to be suggesting players to Newcastle if he's moving on somewhere else, is he? He's not going to be looking for to make Newcastle stronger, because his thoughts will be elsewhere. And I think that as soon as something like that happens, okay, it might be called gardening leave, but best that the guy leaves the club as soon as possible. And if there is truth in the story, and let's get somebody new in to do that particular job. I just find it bad taste that such business should be done where they're competing sides, Manchester United and Newcastle United, and they're doing this at a real key time for what's going to happen in the summer.
I mean, that's true enough, but I think that's why gardening leave comes into anybody that's leaving, so that they don't go off and take everything that you've done on behalf of the club you've been at and stick it straight to Manchester United. Sure. You can have 3 to 9 months gardening leave. You can have 12 months gardening leave if the club goes crazy or the buying club doesn't pay enough compensation, etc., etc. And it is a bad time to go, but I've got to re-emphasize what I've already said, guys, is that Dan Ashworth does not pick Newcastle United's transfer targets. He is the whiz kid at doing the deals. Once Stan Nixon or Howe's nephew and Eddie with his input decides who Newcastle are buying, he's the whiz kid that then makes it happen. But he doesn't pick the targets. So picking the targets between now and the summer is not going to change whether Ashworth's part of the equation or not, which is how we got Bruno and Trippier before he come, because the organisation that picks our targets was in place then and is still in place now, which is Stan Nixon, Howe's nephew, Howe himself, and the scouting teams. And I think this guy's real forte comes into place once you've got a target and you've got to agree a transfer fee, you've got to agree wages, you've got to do this, you've got to do it. He's brilliant at that. But, hey, we signed Bruno and Trippier without him.
Yes.
Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Good
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a story that's going to run and run. I'm sure we will be talking about it again over the next couple of weeks. We are halfway through the show. Time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. Go to their website, skipsandbins.com. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Go to their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Thanks to United Group Travel. Go to their website, unitedgrouptravel.com. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com or phone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. They're a local company from Morpeth and there are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the subscribe button under the video. Click the thumb up to like the video and click share to share to your social media. If you want to help the channel financially, you can pay a one-off £25 fee. You get a cup, a scarf, a pen and a membership card and entry into the NUFC Matters monthly draw. Email john@nufcmatters.com for more details, or if you've got a smartphone, scan the QR code now and it takes you straight to the membership pack. We also support the food bank on this channel. Go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you'll find the matchday bucket. You can make a donation virtually today. You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify and other podcast providers. We also do events during the year. NUFC Matters Live will be at the O2 City Hall on Friday the 2nd of August for an evening with Rob Lee, one night in Antwerp. Tickets start at £15 and you can get them from ticketmaster.co.uk. An evening with the entertainers takes place on Friday the 24th of January 2025 at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House in Newcastle. Telephone 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk to buy tickets today. You can also catch me on the North East Footy Breakfast Show live on Toon Radio weekdays 7 till 9 a.m. on DAB, smart speakers and the toonuk.com. And don't forget, we've got our end of season due as well. 20th of July at the Irish Centre. £10 a ticket at nufcmatters.com. And there's going to be a live Q&A with John and Malcolm. A band called Static None. George is going to do an Ask George and be a few of the NUFC Matters regulars there as well. So get yourself along. We'll be raising money for the food bank. Okay, I have got a question in for the lads. We've got a few comments about Dan Byrne, by the way. Not Dan Byrne, about Dan Ashworth. Lots, some which you can't read out. Keegan's statue says, most of Ashworth's ideas and plans for the future will have been put into place already. A new face can add extra knowledge, experience and ideas to build on Dan's work, which is, yeah, exactly. It's not the end of the day just because you lose him. And finishing up on the sporting director, Dave just says, Malcolm, would you have worked with a sporting director if you were a manager?
No, because the manager did all of that. All the responsibilities that are Ashworth's would have been done by the manager.
Yeah. Would you have been happy? Would you have been happy? I think what Dave was trying to say was, had you been a manager now, would you have been happy working with a sporting director if you had a choice?
Yes, yeah, I'd be quite happy to do that, but I would have the last say on everything as the manager.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and that's important. And if in any way that's ever usurped by a board or whoever, then that's a problem for the club, a serious problem. And if you remember, Ashley, he did that to one of the managers in
Kevin Keegan, Malcolm.
Well, there was Kevin Keegan, but then he did it to dear me, Alan Pardew.
Did it to everybody if he could get away with it, didn't he?
Well, I suppose so, but he sort of but he almost belittled Alan Pardew, didn't he?
He certainly belittled Alan Shearer and Kevin Keegan. He told Kevin Keegan was told to watch the signings on YouTube.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Cisco. Just to name one.
The Cisco kid.
Kylian Mbappe has told PSG he's leaving at the end of the season. We've seen that. Is he Callum Wilson's replacement, lads? Yes, I know. That was a joke.
Wait a minute. No. I mean, I'm trying to get Chris Wood back. Hey, behave yourself.
Well,
I mean, top goal scorer at Nottingham Forest. I mean, that's got to count for something, hasn't it?
Should have stayed.
If we can get him back and we can get Shelby back to play as a number 6, next season will be taken care of.
Well, Mbappe will be looking at it and thinking to himself, well, if I go and sign for Newcastle, it means I don't have to play against Dan Byrne ever again.
Yeah, exactly. That's a positive.
Big Dan put him in his back pocket.
He did. He did.
Absolutely in his back pocket.
Hi lads, question for John O'Mal. I watched the 1976, the big match of the 1976 FA Cup 6th round tie away at the Derby. He said, I've never heard about our keeper, Eddie Edgar. Only game he ever played. Why did he play?
Well, it would have been through injuries.
It was Malcolm, yes.
And that was through injuries, and it was the only game that he played. And he then, at some point later, went and played in Canada and took his coaching badges, and he opened up a huge coaching centre.
I mean, if you remember that game, Malcolm, I think we got beat 4. Got beat 4, and Eddie never played again. But if you also remember,
Steve, what his performance was like.
But flapping in the wind a little bit. But if you remember, Steve, and I'm trying to think of his Christian name, our centre half Edgar, that was his son.
Yeah, that's right, David Edgar.
Yeah, remember the kid?
Yeah,
that was Eddie's son. Yeah,
that's right. But Eddie is over in Canada, isn't he, Johnny? He opened up a huge coaching school. And what I was told was that it would handle 7,500 kids every week. It was a monster of a thing.
Incredible. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Good question. Thanks for that, Jason. Emil Kraft signed a new contract, another 1-year extension, joining Fabian Schär on that list of players who have been committing to another season. Are you happy with that, John?
Well, it's par for the course with Newcastle, isn't it? Because you see, we're progressing, and the progress is slow, and you've got to have backup while you process. You know, you might want to improve the first team, but you've got to sit 9 people on the subs bench, and therefore you've got to get the number 7, 8, and 9 on the subs bench filled. And Kraft can cover right back and centre half, and so he's got it. I mean, this is a policy that'll be repeated, guys. And, you know, we've got Dummett out of contract at the end of the season. Now, everybody would say Paul should go, and I think for Paul's own peace of mind, he should go, because he should be playing, because he's a long time retired and he doesn't play.
Yeah.
But he may well be offered a contract. Lascelles will be offered a contract, that's for certain. His contract's up. So Lascelles and maybe Dummett will follow Kraft in getting a new contract. Ritchie should be well beyond the sell-by date, bless him, and shouldn't be offered a new contract. Neither should Gillespie. But I think you'll get people like Lascelles for absolute certain, and Dummett maybe offered new contracts like Kraft.
Malcolm, I mean, it just seems that we're keeping hold of all of these old players, but I guess it hammers home the point that we haven't got a great deal of business potentially that we can do over the course of these transfer windows because of FFP.
Yeah. Until we're able to free ourselves from the shackles that FFP have thrown all over the club, then yes. But I just look at somebody like Kraft, and I think, well, you know, you're signing this contract, and you know that the best you're going to get is sitting on the bench and maybe just getting on every now and again for 10 or 15 minutes. And if that satisfies you as a professional, and you're happy enough to get old and look back at your career and say, oh dear, I was brilliant on that touchline. You know,
yeah.
I don't understand it myself personally. That if I wasn't in the team, I was banging on the manager's door, wanting away. And you find the level that suits you, and with Kraft, because good heavens above, he's an international player, for heaven's sake. He's an international, and he's happy to, because it's not as if he even has regular reserve team football. He doesn't, because that sort of situation doesn't really exist anymore.
No, because they're all injured.
yeah, but it's very much age rated outside of the first team squad, and so these players, that, how many minutes has Kraft been on the pitch so far this season? And here we are, middle of February. I bet he hasn't been on the pitch for 3 hours.
No, I mean, I can never quite understand it from a personal point of view, Malcolm, as you rightly say. If I was Paul Dummett, I'd be thinking I'm going to be a long time retired. I could, if I dropped down from the Premier League, be playing regularly, and I would prefer to do that. From Newcastle United's point of view, they've got to fit in 20 players every match day. Now, if you've got 10 injured, which we have, if you've got 10 injured, that's covering 30 players on a match day. You're 10 injured, you're 11 to play, and you're 9 on the bench. And Newcastle, so what you're going to get is you're going to get some aging players who regularly get a position on the bench, like this season, Gillespie and Ritchie and Kraft and Dummett, who are not going to get anywhere near starts, but they've got to fill up the back end of the bench. Or you get kids who are going on the bench, like White and like Parkinson, and you've got to have a sort of balance between the two. So Newcastle are they're offering Kraft and these people an extra year, always just a year, because you don't want anything larger. You've got to, at some stage, allow them or get rid. But you're right, they're looking at it like, I'm on decent wages here, I'm happy, the family's happy, I'm not going to move. Ambition's out the window, but maybe that's another way of looking at it. Like, from Newcastle's point of view, this would change. Once you become Manchester City or Arsenal or Liverpool of today, who's been established for seasons, then you can have a stronger bench than that. Those go out the window and you get a bigger bench because you've had more wiggle room. We have had no wiggle room. What financial fair play has done to us is absolutely crippled us. It's absolutely stunted our growth big time, and will continue to stunt our growth. We have got to take small steps. Manchester City, when they were taken over, were allowed to do big steps because there was no financial fair play when they were originally taken over, so they could just do what they liked. Now we've got to take small steps, and that's going to hold us back for seasons. We're going to continue to make progress, but not at the level from last season, from relegation to fourth top.
Yeah.
Interesting question from Alan. He says, where do you honestly think Newcastle will finish now with 14 games to go, Gibbo?
Well, before the news of Wilson came, and I should have anticipated it, I believe we are now, there's no more wiggle room left. My favourite word is wiggle. There's no more wiggle room left because we are 7th. Now, if you want to guarantee Europe, we've got to finish in the top 5. Because the 4 places in the Champions League, 1 place in the Europa League, the other Europa League place goes to the FA Cup winners, and the conference place goes to the League Cup winners. You can qualify from 7th, which is where we are now, if the 2 domestic cups are won by top clubs. For example, if Liverpool win the League Cup instead of Chelsea, they're going to go into the Champions League. So that position will revert back to the league. So the 6th will qualify. If the FA Cup's won by another big club, say Man City, then that reverts back into the league. So you qualify from 7. There is the possibility of 5 sides being in the Champions League, just to confuse it even more. That's only at risk, ironically, because we've put it at risk by going out of Europe so quickly with Manchester United that it's going to be taken on the average of how well a country has done in Europe this particular season. We aren't in a driving seat there at the moment because of Manchester United and Newcastle United. But But we are 7th, and I've looked at the 14 games left, guys, and if we had an even squad, and you've got to remember that while Wilson's gone, Isaac is going to come back. We might have 3 games of no centre forward, but Isaac is going to come back. And you look at those 14 games, guys, and we only play a current top 6 club 3 times. The only top 6 club that's got to come to St James's Park is Spurs, and the only top 6 club we play away is Arsenal and Manchester United. All the rest, the other 11 games we play are clubs that are currently below us in 7th place. Now, there's no wiggle room, because if we beat Bournemouth and get 3 points, we don't go up a place, because 6th place is Manchester United, 5 points ahead of us. So we can't go any higher. But if we don't get the points, there's West Ham, there's Chelsea now, and Brighton, all within striking distance of being able to go above us. So we're more vulnerable than we are going to chew other people out. But if you look at the fixture list, we only play 3 top 6 clubs out of 14 games before the end of the season. You've got an outside chance. Forget the Champions League. That's pie in the sky. You've got an outside chance of finishing 6th or 7th. And 6th this season will be good enough if Liverpool win the League Cup.
Right. There is one problem on what you say, John, and that is that Newcastle seem to do better against the sides in the top half of the table.
Correct. Oh, yeah, you're absolutely correct. But well, that's 9 points, and we've got against Spurs, Manchester United,
right.
But I'm hoping that they're not all, Malcolm. They're not all in a relegation fight at the bottom. And as the season goes on, those in mid-table, they lose the will to fight, don't they? Those that are in mid-table, they're not going to go into Europe. They're not going to be relegated.
Flip-flops on.
If you get amongst them, they sacrifice the points, don't they?
Yeah. Yes, very true.
But we've got to play without a centre forward. And believe you me, however good a player Gordon is, when Gordon plays centre forward, first of all, he's not an automatic goal scorer. So he's not a natural centre forward. But the biggest drawback, we've lost our best winger.
Yeah.
That's the biggest drawback. When he plays centre forward, we've lost our best winger.
Mm-hmm. Okay, lots to cram in the last 20 minutes. Spenny, good evening. He says, question to the two legends. I mentioned on the fans forum on Monday that if it comes to Bruno being suspended and still waiting for players to come back in, would you play Fabian Schär in midfield and Kraft at centre back? John?
Very interesting question, and this has been thrown up a few times. I mean, Bruno is certain to be suspended at one time. Bless him, isn't he? He only needs one more booking. I mean, he admitted, and at least it's getting through to the kid. He admitted that when he scored the winner against Forest, he was about to take his shirt off to celebrate and realised he'd get booked and he would have a 2-match suspension, so he kept it on. He's actually beginning to think about it, which is wonderful. He was terrific at Nottingham Forest, by the way, and well done.
Yeah, he was.
And he played, you know why he was terrific, guys? Because he played in his proper position, which is the attacking midfielder. He hasn't got the discipline or the whoosh to be the number 6, to play defensively. Our midfield, the balance will never be right with these 3 boys because they don't complement each other. Each one of them is individually got things going for them. But doing the defensive job, I mean, Miley was switched to being a 6 so that Bruno could go forward. Bruno going forward was huge. It was wonderful. Asking a 17-year-old kid to play as a 6 when it's not his natural midfield game is asking an awful lot. And he has got football intelligence and he is clever, etc., etc. But he does lose concentration. People do run off the back of him because he's 17-year-old, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
He's not a natural defensive midfield player. And we've got that's another one. I don't want to get on the hobby horse because I leave that to Malcolm with with Bruno and sorry, not Bruno, Maxi and everybody and that big Dan Burn. But we need a 6 and we need a centre forward. Yes, we're going to lose Bruno. Isn't it amazing? We look at the team, and if we are talking tonight, Steve, and you ask us, what's the team going to be on Saturday? We know the back four is going to be the same. We'll probably none of us would play Burn and would play Livramento, but we know the manager isn't going to do that. So the back four is going to be the same. The centre three is going to be the same because we haven't got anybody else. And so the only wiggle room's up front, and that's been made less by the Callum Wilson situation. But we really missed Joe Linton. We've actually missed, and we don't talk about it a lot because Joe Linton's the big miss, but we've missed the legs of Willock, getting box to box. I mean, the legs of Willock is taken out of this team has been a massive, massive lift. Perhaps Anderson's going to come back. We're going to get some wiggle room in midfield. Anderson can play as a false 9 the same as Gordon can. Can Bonds play as a false 9 if we need a false 9 for a while? I mean, I tell you what, Malcolm could play as a false 9 now,
There was a couple of texts that I saw. One was, how about playing Shaw midfield and playing Kraft at the back?
Yeah.
But then there's, and I thought, no, you don't want Shaw in midfield. If anywhere, stick him up front as a 9.
I was going to say he is the best goal scoring centre half we've had since Philip Albert scored that chip against Manchester United. Yes, but and there's the possibility. I mean, Shaw's played there not only for us, but I think he's played there for Sweden on the very rare occasion. The defensive midfield player, Shaw, has played there.
Not Sweden, Switzerland.
Sorry, I do apologise. Absolutely so. But I think he has it on the international stage. I think he has played there.
I think he has.
And the interesting thing is, it may not be Kraft that played right side centre half then. It may be Lascelles. Now he's fit again because he had a steady run in there recently, didn't he? He had a steady running there. But, I mean, we haven't got, on the whole of the books, we haven't got a defensive midfielder. I mean, definitely Big Joe's not that, but he just does every part of that job, doesn't he? He's so physical, he's so strong, he's so big and powerful that he breaks up play and he's a huge barrier without ever being a defensive midfield player because he wants to drive forward. And he's been a terrific miss. Our midfield is so unbalanced, it's untrue. We've got to grit our teeth and get on with it at the moment, but it is not balanced.
No, well, but when you say it's not balanced, John, it tips forward. It doesn't sort of tip back.
Correct. Absolutely, Malcolm. Absolutely, Malcolm. That's exactly what it does. And it's a 4-3 midfield, isn't it?
Yes.
We'll score 4 and let in 3, or we'll score 3 and you let in 4. It's a 4-3 midfield at the moment.
Wiggle count is on 11, said Blue Rhythm Boy before for John. Blue, who was the best keeper you faced, Malcolm?
The best, Peter Shilton. Peter Shilton, without any shadow of a doubt. Pat Jennings also, I would say. But for me, Peter Shilton was absolutely outstanding. He really was. And he was a lovely fella. Absolutely fabulous guy. He really is. But I've seen Shilts make some unbelievable saves. And all too often they were against me.
That's why he's the best keeper. Newcastle take on Bournemouth this weekend, 3 o'clock kickoff, and Eddie Howe will be looking to beat his former side for the first time in the Premier League as Magpies boss, having failed to do that in the last 3 attempts. We did, of course, beat Bournemouth in the Carabao Cup in December 2022, a 1-0 win for Eddie Howe's boys against Bournemouth in that particular game. The Premier League meetings last season, of course, well, they were 2 1-1 draws. We've already played them this season at the Vitality, and that was a 2-0 win for Bournemouth. Newcastle are without a victory in their last 3 Premier League home games. Been a while since we've had to say that. The last time we went 4 without claiming maximum points at SJP was the start of 21-22. We were winless in 7 back in that period as well. Team news a bit early, as you know, on a Thursday, but Callum Wilson is now out for 9 to 12 weeks. He's having surgery on his pectoral injury. Joe Willock and Elliot Anderson are getting closer to returns. We probably won't find out how close on Friday. We'll have to wait till Saturday to see one of them is going to be risked. Jacob Murphy was on the bench at Nottingham Forest, but he was unable to play the game because he picked up a calf injury during the warm-up. He did, yeah. We're hoping he will be. We are hoping he's going to be available against Bournemouth at the weekend. Of course, long-term absences, Nick Pope, Joe Linton, Matt Targett and Sandro Tonali all out for various reasons. As for Alexander Isak, he is getting close to recovery. We don't expect him to feature this weekend. Never write it off, though. Anthony Gordon left a game on a boot 2 weeks ago. Didn't expect to see him last weekend. He played the full game, more or less. So, you never know. John's already mentioned the yellow card situation. Bruno Guimaraes still walking the tightrope. He's on 9 bookings, 1 more, and he's suspended for 2 games. Anthony Gordon, he's got 2 more to go before he reaches suspension. Let's hope they can both get through the game unscathed from an injury and from bookings at the weekend. As for Bournemouth, again, early for team news, but we know Philip Billing is definitely suspended. There's going to be fitness checks over Max Aarons, Tyler Adams, Ryan Fredericks and James Hill. They went to Fulham and they were beaten 3-1 on Saturday gone. That extends their winless run in the Premier League to 5 games. The manager, was Rayo Vallecano's manager. So he was sitting in the dugout when we played them in December 22. And Newcastle ran out 2-1 winners on that occasion. Bournemouth have won 4 times on the road so far this season. They notched up consecutive victories in November and December at Sheffield United 3-1 and Crystal Palace 2-0. They also had a win at Manchester United 3-0, which shows they shouldn't be underestimated. Notts Forest 3-2. They had draws at Brentford and West Ham 2-2 and 1-1 respectively. The other 6 away games have ended in defeat. They've scored at least once in all but one of their 14 league and cup games so far this season. Referee, it's your first time in charge of a Newcastle fixture this season for Mr. Salisbury. And VAR, which is often switched off, is Rob Jones. So Michael Salisbury, the referee. So John, big game for Newcastle. On a good run ourselves. Looking to build on it and obviously looking to end the bad run of form at home, John.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We've shipped goals at home. We used to say this was a fortress. It was only Liverpool and Manchester City, I'm talking about Eddie Howe years, that come up here and got results. In the last 3 results at home, we've let in 4 against Luton, 3 against Man City, 3 against Forest. 2 sides fighting relegation, and we're facing another side in the bottom half of the table this time. We said before we went on this one of 3 games, we had to get a minimum of 7 points out of 9. When we only got 1 against Luton, we were worried. But we then got 3 at Forest. So if we get 3 against Bournemouth, we've got the 7 points out of 9. We're going to have to do it with a false 9 because we haven't got a centre forward. That is not a help because if it's Gordon, as I say, and it will be Gordon, he's not a natural goal scorer and we've lost our best winger. But Bournemouth on in a run of form. They haven't won in the last 5 Premier League games. That is not a good run of form. They're not in form. And if we don't beat Bournemouth at home, we can forget about Europe, man. If you don't beat Bournemouth at home, then you don't qualify for Europe. That is a certainty. However, having faced reality, I think we will beat Bournemouth at home. And with or without a centre forward, and it's going to be without a centre forward, I think we'll win. I'm taking Newcastle to win.
What's the prediction, John?
I don't think, because of the lack of goal-scoring power, I don't think it'll be easy. I'm going 2-0 or 2-1. It might even be as close as 2-1. You know what? I don't care what the score is, as long as at the end of it, there's a big W for win. If that's on the end, the job's done.
I'm going 2-1. Malcolm, thoughts on the game and your prediction?
Yeah, I thought that Newcastle, it was just about the worst game that they played all season down at Bournemouth. So I'm hoping that they completely reverse that on Saturday. I'm gonna take Newcastle to win. They've not been that great at home over the past few weeks, and if they're going to maintain 7th place, which I think it should get them into Europe, then these kind of games you've got to win. You have to win, and whether we've got a centre forward or not, whether it's a false 9 and it's Gordon. The one thing about Newcastle is that there's goals all over the team. You know, we're not relying just on one man. And in fact, to be honest, Wilson, I think he's been suffering the past 3 games, and he's really not been himself. So, and Newcastle have scored a lot of goals. So, I'm going to take Newcastle to win 3-1, and I'm looking forward to some really good football. I think Bournemouth, the football they play is absolutely superb.
Yeah. Okay. Don't forget, you can see John along with John Anderson at the Tyneside Irish Centre. That is on Saturday. It's 12 o'clock, doors open. John and John will be on stage around about 1 o'clock. So get yourself in there. Kids are welcome at the Tyneside Irish Centre. So look forward to seeing you all there, guys. Lads, been a pleasure. Take care, and I will see you next week. Take care, lads.
All right.
Keep the faith.